Thank you very much, Robert. With me now, we have Congressman Mick Mulvaney, Republican from South Carolina, and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, and a member of the House Budget Committee. And Congressman Mulvaney, I wanted to read a bit of reporting that came from Byron York at the Washington Examiner today. And I'm quoting now from his article. There are 233 Republicans in the House. Insiders estimate that 3/4 of them, or about 175 GOP lawmakers, are willing and perhaps even eager to vote for a continuing resolution that funds the government without pressing the Republican goal of defunding or delaying Obamacare. It's a sort of shocking bit of reporting there, indicating that a very small minority of one party in one half of one branch of Congress is calling the shots here.
Chris, it's news to me. I'd not read that piece that you've mentioned, and having sat through probably more Republican conference meetings in the last 4 or 5 days than for the last several months, I just don't see that in our room when we go in. Today we went in, actually kicked staff out, which is very so that we could have a very private conversation about what was happening. And the support for what we did 2 weeks ago was very high. I think we got all Republican but one. The support for what we did just 2 days ago was very high. We got overwhelming majorities of our own party. We only lost a couple folks. And again today, the support for what we're bringing up tonight is still very strong. You're absolutely right. Mr. King of New York has some difficulties with it, as does Mr. Dent of Pennsylvania. But overall, the support for this is very strong. So that's not jiving with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's been an assertion through much of the day that I've seen, not just from Byron York, but backed up in a lot of reporting, that if the Speaker were to bring a clean CR to the floor right now in the House of Representatives that matched what the Senate has passed, that would pass with the majority of members of the United States House of Representatives. Are you saying that's not true?
I'm just saying I've not seen any evidence of it. I have no information where Mr. York is getting that. I've not seen that. That has not been the tenor of our conversations in those meetings. That's not been the message in our meetings. So our message has been fairly consistent, which is that we are going to try and chip away at Obamacare as part of these continuing resolution debates, and that's the plan again for this evening.
Congressman Jeffries, what's your response to that, to the seemingly united front that Republicans are now presenting when it looked like a complete kind of balkanized mess a few hours ago? Where do you see this headed?
Well, holding the government hostage to an extreme ideological agenda is very problematic, particularly as it relates to the attempt to repeal or defund or delay the Affordable Care Act. As Speaker Boehner indicated earlier this year, the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. It was passed by the Congress in 2010. The Supreme Court declared it constitutional in 2012. The American people elected, re-elected President Obama last November. This should be a settled matter. We're in a position now where we're a few hours away from a government shutdown that will cause significant pain for the American people. It will cause pain for working families, for the military, for civil service employees, for children, for senior citizens, those that rely on Meals on Wheels. And the responsibility will lie squarely with the House Republican majority, which has steadfastly held to this position that is their way or the highway, and that's quite unfortunate.
Congressman Mulvaney, one of the things that have been attached to this continuing resolution, aside from delaying the mandate for a year, is a so-called Vitter Amendment, which would take away, essentially, the employer contribution to health care, an employer contribution that people in all sorts of large employers receive as part of their compensation. It would take away employer compensation for staff members, for members of Congress and their staffs. Are you prepared to go into your office and look secretaries and clerical workers and other staff members making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year and tell them they're going to have a several $1,000 pay cut?
Absolutely, because as my staff told me, what we're fighting back against tonight is the OPM decision that the Obama administration handed down a couple weeks ago. In fact, I think it was finalized today, that said we get this subsidy. That's not what the law says. The law says we don't get it. The president doesn't have the right to change that unilaterally.
The subsidy, when you say subsidy, it's an incredibly misleading term. The subsidy in the exchanges for everyone else who are in the exchanges because their employers don't provide health insurance. Let's remember that Chuck Grassley passed this specifically to make people have to use the exchanges even though they already have employer-provided health insurance. We're not talking about tax credits. We're not talking about a subsidy. We are talking about compensation for your staff members who make a good deal less than you.
You use whatever word you want. It's illegal. The president cannot do this. The law as passed, we just heard Congressman Jeffries correctly say it's the law of the land.
What?
The law of the land says that we don't get this type of assistance from our employer. Like it or hate it, I can't argue that, but it is the law, and the president does not have the right to change that unilaterally.
Congressman Jeffries, what do you think about your colleagues voting to essentially give a pay cut, a significant pay cut, to everyone who works in that building for, I can't figure out the reason?
Well, I have no doubt in the good faith of Congressman Mulvaney. However, I do think that overall this collective strategy related to the legislation that's now before us is a political gimmick, and it's not going to work. Harry Reid has clearly indicated that it's dead on arrival. If it gets to the Senate, the president won't sign it into law, and it's a further delay tactic that has us spiraling down the road of a government shutdown. I think that a clean CR is clearly in the best interest of the American people, and I'm just hopeful that at the end of the day, reasonableness will prevail. We can find common ground, get behind and beyond this government shutdown crisis, and then we can sit down at the negotiating table and try and find common ground to do what's right for the economy and for the American people moving forward.
Congressman Mulvaney, shouldn't the best way to actually have a negotiated settlement to a budget be to go through the normal budget process and have John Boehner appoint conferees to a conference committee so that both houses can actually work out their differences through the process that is designed to do precisely that?
You know, I heard your introduction talk about that, and certainly I think everybody can agree that sometimes going through regular order is better, but it's wrong to say that that's only a recent change. In 2009 and 2010, actually, the gentleman that I beat was the budget chairman who didn't even offer a budget that year. So to say that regular order has broken down since the Republicans have been in the House is just not right. But let's talk about what we're really trying to get at, which is common ground, right? We've sent over, as you and I talked about on this show 10 days ago, we sent over a plan to defund Obamacare entirely. They sent us back a CR. We sent them over a one-year delay earlier this week. They sent back a CR. We're going to send them another thing tonight. They're probably going to send back a CR. Where is the common ground? Where is the Senate working to keep the government open?
I'll tell you where it is, with due respect, Congressman. The common ground is this. The funding levels that are in both the CR that came from the Senate and the funding levels in the one that Democrats in the House are ready to vote for is a funding levels that keep sequestration funding intact. That is not anything the Democratic caucus wants. And Congressman Jeffries, feel free to weigh.
Chris, that's the law of the land.
That is a massive concession.
That's spending. It's not a concession. It's the law.
So is Obamacare.
In the budget. So they're pushing back on the Budget Control Act because they don't like it, and we're pushing back on Obamacare because we're like, that's how the system is supposed to work.
Congressman Jeffries, are you pushing back on sequestration?
We absolutely are pushing back on sequestration. It's a very painful thing for the American people. And the Democrats in both the House and the Senate are compromising as it relates to setting the funding level at $986 billion, which is very different than what would otherwise be the case had sequestration not come into effect. So we're already in a place of compromise.
Congressman Mick Mulvaney and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, I understand you gentlemen will have a vote in a little bit, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.